Well, Chanel, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you on. Finally, get you here in the chair. So we're just going to jump straight into the show. I start off with, what career did you want to do when you were in grade school, high school, and college? That's a mouthful, I know.
Let's see. When I was in grade school, I think for a period of time, I thought I was going to be either a, a lawyer
Hmm.
or a model. When I got to high school, what did I think I wanted to be in high school? That's a good question. I have no idea. But I definitely know when I got to college, I thought I was going to do international business.
Okay.
I knew that I loved traveling, and I wanted to see the world. And so um, international business was my thing. And so initially thought I would do that. And then I switched over to, um, by my second year of college, I switched over to African American, and Caribbean studies
Mm,
and political science.
okay.
So I thought I would go into politics.
Okay. Well, you kind of did.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but you kind of did. And so, what career did you do right before becoming a doula?
Right before I became a doula, I was a commodities broker. So I used to import diamonds and jewelry for luxury brands like Sotheby's
Hmm.
and De Beers and other places like that.
Okay. And how did you go from that commodities to doula work? Like, what was the catalyst? Because that's a big one.
That's, I know that is a
that
huge
is.
one.
That is.
So the catalyst for that was my pregnancy with my first child.
Uh-huh.
My oldest, he's 12 years old, and yeah, it just completely changed my whole life and my whole perspective.
Hmm.
Just the care that I was given. So I had a. Am I supposed to tell my birth? This is one
You
of my
could you
birth
could tell
stories.
you could tell what your restaurant. Yeah, it's kind of like we got that one
um,
checked.
but I had a beautiful home birth with him. My doula was Sayana Devotion, who I think she's in Connecticut and
Mm-hmm.
has a practice called Earth Natural Touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a midwife who is Mamani Q, who
Mm-hmm.
owns Sekora Sunda Midwifery. And it was an amazing experience. Like, hands down, like the experience that I received and the care that I received really transformed my um, idea of what reproductive health care looks like. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I always have to say that, we don't understand necessarily the catalyst of like doula work and how you're not just like helping someone in that very moment. You're
Yeah.
being like you can be a catalyst to someone, doing amazing things for other people too.
Yeah. So what was your opinion before becoming pregnant and of the healthcare system? Like, what was your experience? What did you think your experience would be? And then how did you go to choosing a home birth midwife?
Yeah, I definitely knew that I didn't want to birth in a hospital, but I didn't even know that that was possible. So, if we backtrack like maybe 2 years, when I was working, I happened to be in Union Square, and I came upon a natural birth expo, and I was like, "Wow, this is dope!" Like I didn't
Hmm.
know that there were so many options. What I did observe though was that the majority of the individuals that were there were white, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, there's nobody who looks like me. And then I happened upon Amani, and she was there with like some doulas, and they had a table, and she was like, yeah, I'm a midwife. And I was like, a midwife? Like I didn't even know Black midwives still existed,
Yeah.
because I
Hmm.
thought about it from a perspective of like, this is, I read about them in classes and things of that nature, but
Hmm.
I didn't know that it was anything that was possible.
Yeah.
And so I had held on to that information for like 2 years, because I had no intentions of being pregnant. And, and then I
Yeah.
met my husband in a health food store on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn, beautiful
Yeah.
Brooklyn
Hmm.
story.
Yep.
And yeah, and it totally, I remembered I had that info, and then I went on MySpace, and yeah,
MySpace.
MySpace
Back in the
before it was
day.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before it was that music platform, I went on
Exactly.
MySpace and I found that midwife and the doula, and yeah, um, it completely changed my whole perspective of healthcare. Because prior to that, I had a couple of years, early 2000s, I had a myomectomy
Mm.
for fibroids, and was told I would never, I probably never be able to have children. Well,
But
6 children later,
yes, hey.
and
I love to hear these stories because they have no clue. No
yeah, no,
clue.
none
Yeah.
whatsoever, like none, no
Yeah.
context, no understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so yeah, I had that myomectomy because I had, huge fibroids, where people were coming up to me and were like, "Are you pregnant?" And I was like, "Wait a minute now, like something's
Something wrong.
wrong,"
Yeah.
and um ended up getting the surgery. Knew I didn't want to get fibroids again,
Mm-hmm.
because being a Black woman, we know that this is something that happens to be sometimes repetitive in
Yes.
our reproductive health. And changed my lifestyle, became a vegan, and yeah, and basically like healed myself from, because I was like, these people don't know what they're talking
They
about.
don't know what they're talking about. Exactly.
I
They
have
don't
no
look
clue.
as food as healthcare. They really
Right.
don't. And so then after after that experience, how did you go into forming a certification program? So,
Um, so first off, that was never my intention.
uh-huh.
My intention was to, which I think a lot of doulas' intentions are, is like you take a training, you're like, I'm going to do this work independently.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a business,
Mm-hmm.
and um, that was my initial intention. And as I was doing the work, I realized the ways in which Black, brown, and indigenous people were disenfranchised or criminalized during bedside.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting with someone going to a prenatal, waiting for 4 hours to be seen for
Yes.
10 minutes, right? Coming out of it, lost, having child protective services called on individuals at bedside.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I can't be the only person who, feels this way, who's
Yeah.
like going through this process. And so I had put a call out on one of the listservs, like a doula listserv,
Mm-hmm.
or birth workers listserv. And I was like, are there any people out there who are interested in working with low income individuals?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and it just kind of started from there. I didn't know, I had no clue. What I did know is that, I shouldn't say I had no clue. What I should say is that I used the skills that I had from being a broker, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, but also thinking about really wanting to create space where people could just be seen and heard. And so I
Mm-hmm.
opened up my house, and it started in my living room.
Oh wow.
And it started with just, feeding folks. So I would cook,
Mm-hmm.
and I would feed them, and I would listen to their stories. Um, and it wasn't just, the clients that were coming. It was also the doulas,
Yeah.
right? So like, realizing when I took doula training, while I appreciate the doula training that I received, it was amazing. There were certain things that I realized I didn't know, and it
Yeah.
was also things that I realized were not being talked about, such as like reproductive justice,
Mm-hmm.
birth justice,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't being uplifted, which was something that when I was in college, activism was a huge part of my life,
Yeah.
so it was like, I was like, well, how do I intersect like the birth part
Yes.
of,
Into yeah.
of what I love to do into this? And so, yeah, it wasn't something that came out of the intention. It came out of a need that I saw within the community to uplift, um, BIPOC, low income folks who
Mm-hmm.
I realized were like just being completely overlooked.
Yeah.
Like no one was, thinking about the people who live between the intersections of things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times our focus is on, even within the realm of Black, brown, and indigenous providers. When we get trained, the realm tends to be focused on like independent um, business growth, which is
Yes.
fine, which is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But what a key component of that is that I think is left out is the moral compass of like, it takes one hand to give and one hand to receive. Right. And that when we primarily work from a framework that's built on a capitalist structure, we're no longer like upholding the ancestral part of the work that we do. You know what I mean? And so even within the context of that, understanding like there's other forms of currency in doing the work. And I always, you know, me living by that mode of there's one hand to give, there's one hand to receive. Like I've never been empty-handed.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of that.
Yeah. I like how you you mentioned, you know, some of the problems that go into this, that you saw in going into this work. When I first started, I started working with a company, I believe it was called A Labor of Love, and she was she got a grant, and I was helping people in Jamaica, Queens, and Brooklyn, and just, you know, I remember supporting this one mom who was having her 5th child, and all of her children were taken away from her. And that was the first time that I was supporting someone through fear in a way that I had never experienced before with any of my other clients, and had to reassure her about things that I wasn't certain of, right? And she was giving birth in a Catholic hospital, and I was just like in Brooklyn, and it was the first time I had ever been to this hospital. I didn't even know that there was a Catholic hospital where they let you labor in one room and then take you into the OR to deliver. Like they took her out of that room, and the entire time, all she could worry about was whether or not they were going to call Child Protective Services on her and take her child away. And because I didn't have all of the information of like, there was a history of drugs, and we all know that they test women without their consent.
Exactly.
So, and then like you also mentioned too, that like that's not something that was taught in my doula training. I got trained through DONA, you know, but I had personal experience with with a family member of that happening too. So kind of understood like what I could tell her, what to say and what to do, because even she had no information, right? And she wanted to keep this child. And so, you know, and in that like little seconds, I was able to get some information like, no, she hadn't done drugs in a while, so she would most probably be clean, so that would be okay. But then like just even telling her, do not answer their questions. Like, and this was something that I wasn't trained to do. So now when you're hearing these stories of not just the women who experience this violence, right? And then the doulas, and then putting together your organization, like how were you able to talk to your doulas in a way to get them to tell their clients when these situations come up, so that they didn't get kicked out of a hospital, right? Because that was the other thing. They were quick to kick doulas out of the hospital if we spoke up. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've always framed it as we're meeting people where they are, not where we expect them to be.
Yes.
As well as understanding that you can't empower anyone, right? You can give someone the tools to advocate for themselves, but once you start to become the advocate in the room, then you also are taking away their bodily autonomy and their voice. And so I continue to reiterate that to doulas, and understanding like, as passionate and compassionate and empathetic that you may be, and really wanting to help someone, you would be doing a disservice to them by overstepping, you know what I mean? And not giving them space to be able to do what they need to do, right? To come into their full selves, right? Because all of their lives, they may have experienced someone always speaking for them, right? And it's not just a new experience for the doulas, but it's also a new experience for the person who's receiving the care, right? Because they may have never been asked like, well, what do you envision for yourself? You know, what do you want for you? What do you want for your child? And so, you know, understanding how those, you know, we play this this role of like the seen unseen, where we have to be very tactful in the ways in which we approach situations. Because no, you don't want to get kicked out. I've had, you know, charge nurses come up to me like, oh, you're interfering with the ways
Oh, you
with
gotta
the
love
ways in
those
which
charge
people can do stuff.
nurses.
And I was like, oh, I didn't know that me emptying the bedpan and or, you know, making
Helping
sure
my
that this person
client. Yeah.
right, making sure this person is comfortable, and centering them and answering their questions in a way where they can make an informed decision was impeding on what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
What they really meant to say was, you're not allowing for this process to move along
Mm-hmm.
as quickly as we would like, because now this person has an opportunity to really think through what it is that they want for themselves.
Exactly.
And so now you're disrupting our flow of how we run our business, because that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah. So then Ancient Song is born. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you come up with one? It's a beautiful name, Ancient Song, and then coming and putting together your whole certification program. Like, what do you what you've included? What did you find was most helpful to include that was missing from other certifying
Yeah.
organizations?
I guess the name came from my own birthing experience and the folks who were in the room. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I asked my family when we were thinking about names, you don't realize how you sound when you are in the process of,
Yeah.
those deep
Mm-hmm.
guttural, noises that you'll make,
Yes.
that, those ancestral tones,
Yes.
the energy that comes into the
Yes.
room. And so my family said, it sounded like you were making like ancient songs, like you were singing an ancient song.
Mm.
And I was like, wait a minute, that's it.
That's it. That, yep, that was it.
I was like, yeah, and what I realized too was that when I was attending births, like everyone has an ancient song
Yes.
that they sing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Whether it's a hum or it's a tap or a clicking or something. Every
Mm-hmm.
every individual, every pregnant person sounds different, but it's their song, right?
Yeah.
It's their ancestral song that they are conveying and being able to bring into that space,
Yeah.
which allows them to birth their child in a way that's affirming to them.
Yeah.
And so that's where the name came from. In regards to certification, that came from my experiences and going to births and seeing things. So for instance, like working with someone who has a substance usage
Mm-hmm.
issue, what does it mean to support someone who has to go to a methadone clinic,
Yes.
not knowing what someone's rights are? What does it mean to work with someone who has mental health issues that are going on? So working with like bipolar individuals and those who may be on the schizophrenia spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
working or have had previous incidences of mania.
Yeah.
And during the postpartum period, like I'm supporting them, and their partner is like, listen, like what do I do? And I'm like,
Yes.
whoa, needing to like be able to have that kind of information. Or even as you mentioned, I realized when I would go to spaces, I remember the first time I witnessed a baby getting taken away from a parent, like immediately. And I was like, whoa, like what's
Mm-hmm.
happening here? Like how
Yeah.
we just
How do you do that? Yeah.
yeah, like how does this happen?
Yeah.
Um and getting in contact with like, defender lawyers and asking questions and finding out like how can we do that. So a lot of the things that we teach have been, that's in the curriculum, were really brought on from the experiences that I had witnessed,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily having the tools to be able to address them.
Okay.
What does it mean to work with someone who has a child protective services case? What does it mean to work with folks who are undocumented? What does it mean to work with someone who, I remember the first client I worked with who um didn't speak any English, and so
Mm-hmm.
like what does it mean to work with someone from where they are, understanding how you can break down even those barriers
Yes.
to language barriers, and still be able to support someone, having someone's religion affirmed, working with
Mm-hmm.
like I've worked with and trained a lot of folks in the Orthodox
Yeah.
Jewish communities, and being able to be in those spaces and to see how birth um takes place.
Mm-hmm.
There's always this like mysticism, in these stories that we hear, but understanding like the realities of what really goes on,
Mm-hmm.
and being people trusting me to be in those spaces to support them,
Yeah.
and those were things that I realized, doulas need to make sure that they're culturally congruent, that they have like cultural humility.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to go into your practice and to be truly humble, and to center and affirm someone in who they are, you know, and their whole selves, and they being able to bring that to fruition without judgment, you know. And I think, yeah, not I think, I know a key part of that is just really wanting, knowing the feeling of when you see someone for the first time, feel like they're being seen and heard. Is really powerful, right? You see the transformation, like you know, you see the beauty of life. You know, my very first birth was a single mom who a midwife, you know, supported her in her home because she couldn't birth in her own home, and the baby was born in the call. And to be able to see like the midwife be so gentle and to just like break the sack and see this baby, you know, take this first breath. And I was like, whoa, okay, so this is like a whole nother, you know what I mean? Like that's a whole nother experience to understand, like, you know, what it means to come from one realm into another realm, right? But to be able to do that in such a nice, smooth transition where you come as your full self, and it's in a calm environment with people who are like affirming you and are loving you, and, you know, really centering your parents so that they can center you. Like that's something that those places, you know, the medical industrial complex is not affirming. At all. And yeah, I really wanted to be able to put that in there. But, you know, and also a huge component of it is centering the people who take the training. So it's not about you just coming and, you know, paying money and taking a training. It's like, you know, what does it mean to center hope in your own lives? You know, I don't believe that you can show up as your full self if you don't feel like your full self. You know, so
that's really wonderful. There was so much of what you said that just, you know, resonated in the sense of I remember my first home birth experience, wondering why everybody wasn't choosing this type of experience, or having clients who were talking about wanting a home birth but weren't saying those words, right? Because they were describing the experience. So it sounds like also too, a lot of what you did was make those connections in the community as well, like of those parents who had those experiences of saying, hey, what about this midwife for your next time? Or they're coming to you asking you those questions. How did you find, you know, how did you find or help them deal with, because we all know it's always the, oh, home birth is dangerous, or someone in their family who's like, oh my God, how are you going to have a home birth when, you know? So how do you help counsel those people to kind of meet home birth midwives and their family? It might be the partner that might be like, we don't do that anymore.
It's so interesting. I think what it is really getting down to the nitty gritty of what their real fears are and concerns. Understanding that it's coming from a place of being institutionalized in a framework that is not set up to promote any other forms of expression when it comes to our reproductive health. It's also understanding that we live in a society that promotes individualism and doesn't promote community-oriented activities or wellness and things of that nature. And so when I would sit with them, you know, and having those partners who are like, nah, man, like I don't know what you're talking about. Like all of that, all that's cute.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're like, yeah, all that's cute, but I'm not feeling that.
Exactly.
But giving them a sense of reassurance, because again, a lot of the stereotypes and the ideas of what people think home birth is based on this narrative that has been fed to us, you know, through media, growing up, things of that nature, you know, stories that you hear from your family members, whether it be folks who have migrated from other places, you know, other continents, or, you know, folks who live in America. You know, one narrative what I would get was, oh, that's just something people do in the country. Like I came for the modernization. I'm not feeling all of that. Right. And then the other flip side of it is that you'll hear sometimes, oh, well, so like, I mean, what are they carrying? Like a black bag? And Like, no, seriously, like,
yeah, exactly. Because that's what they used to do in the movies back then.
right.
The midwife
So
would
you
come in
like,
a big black
people thinking it's
bag.
like,
Yeah.
we talking about call a midwife. And I'm
Yes.
like, this is not the show.
Exactly.
Like, that midwife is coming with like oxygen tanks. They can suture.
Yes.
They're registered nurses.
Yes.
They've been doing this for a while. Like, there's a whole multitude of things
Yes.
that are happening here. And so like really getting them an opportunity and then asking them, truly, like, what does birth look like for you?
Yeah.
And I always start out with that question because 9 times out of 10, people have no idea. They're like, what do you mean? That's the first thing that will come out of my mouth. What do you mean? What does it look like to me? And I'm like, how do you envision bringing your child into the world? Like, what do you want to see in there? And the common answer sometimes is often, I don't know, in a hospital.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, you have other options. Like, what if I told you could birth your baby at home? Well, what if I told you? And they're like, oh, but my apartment's too small. We live in New York.
Yeah.
I'm like, y'all don't nobody care about the apartment size.
Exactly. Or my neighbors. When have you ever been in New York and heard your neighbors? Listen, I heard my neighbors having sex all the time and never went down and knocked on their door. Just, you were like, what's that sound? Oh, yeah.
Right.
And they leave you alone. So
exactly.
Yeah.
They're not even, they're like, whatever.
Exactly.
Because it's New York.
It's New York. Yeah.
Or like, what does it mean to go birthing center? And I would talk to them about, okay, so you don't necessarily feel comfortable with this, but you want that. Well, here's this happy medium of this birthing center that's available for you to access, And then also realizing too, like, a lot of the things that would come out of that would be formulated on, well, my insurance. And so another thing that popped out that is also included in our training is like talking about insurance segregation and the ways in which, people are treated because of that. And so really finding ways to be able to navigate through that so that the person you're working with can have, access, information and be able to choose from a place that feels good to them, not based on circumstance all the time.
That is great. Like, just framing that for people. And so now you have your doula program, you're educating doulas, and now the activism part. How did that come about in this work? I mean, I know it's an easy transition for you, but I've never heard the story. I'd like to hear it. Yeah.
So let's see, how did it come about? I would say my full-blown activism and doula work, I don't know, it's always been there. It's there in, some of the very first t-shirts that we ever had, I have, which we're actually going to bring out again.
Okay.
Which is like a mom with a big belly. She's got a baby on her back in a shotgun.
I will get that one.
But it's always been centered in some form of activism. And I think activism looks different in many different ways. And also understanding just how parenthood is a political act in and of itself. As a parent, I used to, and being a Black woman, being a mother of so many children, I've come in contact with a lot of things, discriminatory practices that are like, for real, like, this is what we're doing. Because this immediate judgment of like who you are, how you show up, what does that mean? And so in realizing that, us even deciding to bring a child earthside is something that is considered to be revolutionary. It's something that is transformative. So I would say my activism started in college, but the catalyst for it was my children, and always continues to be my children, because I want to see them to grow up in a space where they don't have to continue to perpetuate the same conversations that we have to have now. I think where the height of birth work, where it really started to take off, is when they started to come out with the doula bills and the doula Medicaid reimbursement.
Let me tell you, if that was not a catastrophe, I don't know what was. I remember I got a call from someone who was like, you should sign up. And I was like, what is this? And she was like, if you sign up, and then she was a biller. That's what she was.
Okay.
And so she contacted me, and I was like, where'd you get my name from? Like, and then she was talking to me about it, and I was like, this makes absolutely no sense. So, explain a little bit about the bill, and then how your role in having those conversations around what went into that bill and then the disaster. Yeah.
So I had, let me see. I had heard about the bill at the very last minute. I think I was on Facebook and someone posted and said like this bill is, up for discussion, and that was a doula certification bill. And I was like, what? And so I hopped on a train to Albany. I called the person who sponsored the bill. Let me give you some background too of me, just to be clear. I grew up in a very political household.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, I think I was on my first campaign trail when I was 13 years old. So I'm not coming from a space of like not knowing anything.
Yeah.
I'm coming from a space of growing up in a household where I had very political parents and grandparents who held political offices.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately jumped on a train, went up to Albany. And as I got to the floor, found out that the bill was on the floor, and I didn't even know it was on the floor at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the floor, and they were getting ready to vote on it. And as I was sitting outside talking to the legislator who sponsored the bill was on the floor being voted on and passed.
Wow.
And I was like, wait a minute now. Like, what is all of this? Like, where did you get this language from?
Yeah.
Like, who told you this was okay?
Who did you
all
speak
of these different
with?
things.
Yeah.
And they're like, she's like, oh, it's going to advance, the profession. And I was like, the profession is already advanced. Thank you very much. We're good.
Yes.
like you can't just make this without first speaking to community. And what I mean by community is like speaking to who are the stakeholders that are involved. And so what we were able to do, or what I was able to do, was to be able to get some funding to be able to go across state, Ancient Song to go across state, and for us to be able to speak to all of the doula organizations throughout the state, whole listening sessions, and really hear like the impact of what it means. Because when we think about doula services and doula care, we oftentimes only think about downstate, New York City, and totally forget about upstate, right? And the different realities of people who are in rural, spread out areas. What does it mean for them? And so getting to hear their voices and what the bill and how it would impact them, and then that would inform like what legislation would look like. The other piece of it was what I realized early on was that people really have no idea how bills are coming to fruition. And so a lot of the work that we did was centered on being able to educate around like how are bills created. You know what I mean? What does that look like? What's an equitable way? You know what I mean, to really promote a bill. And for me, that has always been to hear from the people that it's going to directly affect. Like if you're not going to talk to them, then it just becomes this like individual who lives in a tower who's talking down to people and saying, oh, this is what you need. Like it's like me going into your house and telling you, you need to move that plant over there, you need to do this.
Exactly.
You need to do that, right? And so I mean, I have a extreme passion for policy. I steered away from it for a very long time. It's like one of those things where you grow up with something in your house and you're like, I'm never gonna do this.
Exactly.
This language.
No,
you're like, this is BS. Because I got to see the behind the scenes stuff of like what goes down. You know what I mean? Like a lot of it is it's playing a game, it's playing a role. It's understanding the politics of everything. So so I had like really and truly steered away from it for a very, very long time. But that was one of the catalysts. And since then, I've been able to work on legislative policy in New York State, in New Jersey, on the state and federal level. I do a lot of, I read bills a lot and will give feedback to individuals on like, how does this look, and thinking about the intersections of how it shows up. And so really applying a reproductive justice, birth justice framework to those things when they're proposed. So I love it.
That's great. It's great. I have to say, I am I watch you and I see all the work that you're doing, and I'm just like, I'm tired for you. Like, how I understand passion, right? Because as
Yes.
doula, like the longest birth I ever attended was 5 days. And I
Okay.
did it, right? And you're just like,
Right.
because you're passionate, and I can see that. But it's one thing to have passion, and then you have a family, a
Hmm.
large family, to
Hmm.
kind of work into. And I know that you bring your children everywhere. I've seen you on panels with your
Hmm.
children, which is great, and having them involved, because again, that's what community is about, and teaching them
Hmm.
from young, right? But how do you do it? Like, just
um, okay, so I want to say first, like, I have an amazing partner who supports me wholeheartedly. Like, if it
hmm
wasn't for him, showing up and being present, he does a lot of, behind the scenes things. Like, he'll take videos and he'll, post stuff, and um, but he has always created space for me to be who I am
hmm
and for me to do the things that I love, and understanding, like, how what I'm doing is greater than just us,
yeah,
is for our community. It's not
hmm
like I don't do this for self gratification. It's
yeah,
not anything about, like, I truly and genuinely um I don't know why I'm about to get emotional, but I truly and genuinely love seeing people come into their full selves. Like,
yeah,
it's a powerful thing
yeah,
to be able to um witness someone's strength and their ability to center themselves and to experience, like, all of the things at one time,
yeah,
um and I the only reason why I'm able to do this is because of the creator, because of the most high.
yeah.
Like, honestly, like, I don't have no kind of superhuman powers. I'm
Mhm.
not saying, oh, I only sleep 4 hours a
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
Like, I'm a human being. I get tired. There's moments where um you know I've had experiences where you're like, do I want to do this? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to check
like,
in
I
with
go
yourself
through,
again. Yeah.
yeah, you go through all of the emotions, but what I realize is that we're all human beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
And in that, it's about growth and transformation, and again, like, really meeting people where they are, not where you expect them to be. And so it's
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
about, and I tell folks, like, I'm not trying to, like, put up some sort of perception. Like, everything I
Yeah.
do is based on, like, I pray before I
Mhm.
do it. I ask for guidance,
Yeah.
every single day. Like, is this something that I should be doing?
Yeah.
Um, I listen to spirit, and allow it to guide me in my intuition,
Mhm.
first and foremost,
Mhm.
before anything I do, because I know I'm just a human being, which
Yeah.
means that as a human being, we are susceptible to ego and to vanity and
Yeah.
to all of those different
Yeah.
things, and realizing that in the work of service, those things don't serve us,
Yeah.
and they don't serve other people. And so, um, yeah, it has only been because of the strength of, like, my family and being able to center my spiritual center in doing this work. But there's times where I'm like, I need to sit my ass down,
Yeah.
and I do.
Okay.
When I need to
That's
sit
good.
down, I'm like, you know what? Pause. Let me take a step back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. So I know I didn't ask this. I didn't specifically ask this question, but I'm gonna throw this one at you. Like, I put, what changes do you wish to see in the industry? But what three changes do you think that you want to see in the birth industry? Like,
With three changes.
mm-hmm.
First one would be economic stability.
Okay.
And so, an enhancement or in a conversation around what does it mean to have sustainable workforce, as well as sustainability and longevity, in terms of um, when a birth worker, if you choose to do this your whole life, or you're a midwife, how you can have something where you can
Yes.
still serve your community and have that necessary capital that is set aside. So
Yeah.
I don't think that we have enough conversations around, like, what isn't, like, the importance of a good credit score, or the
Yes.
importance of, like, um setting up a business infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of a 401k,
Yeah.
right?
Saving for the
Understanding that
future. Mm-hmm.
we don't, when you work independently, you don't
No.
have, like,
Those structures in place.
ain't no
Exactly.
benefits, you know
Nope.
what I'm saying? So,
None.
like, what does it mean to, put those benefits in place, to have a
Yeah.
401k, to invest in stocks
Yes.
too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is, it may seem like it's really difficult, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's something that is it can happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, the other thing that I would like to see is, let me see. What would I like to see? I would like to see a lot more growth in understanding in terms of information technology
Mm.
and the ways in which we use it. And I see that. I see the ways in which, us as BIPOC people have gotten into it, but moving away from it where it doesn't necessarily, and this is also for the economic one, doesn't center a capitalist framework,
Yes.
where it centers a more communal, and really centering what does it mean to uplift ancestral technologies,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the work that we do, and how those technologies are also really valid,
Mm-hmm.
and trusting in those things. So when I say ancestral technologies, thinking about the ways in which we're able to get this like download from our
Yes.
ancestral
Mm-hmm.
cloud, right? That
Mm-hmm.
tells us like how to manifest certain works, and being able to like thereby execute it in a way that centers us. So having those like, those connections, and then putting that on a platform that becomes visible to all. So
Yes.
it's a tool that's accessible. Someone can use it.
Mm-hmm.
They can tap in. The third thing would be, anti-racist medical models of care.
Ooh, that's a mouthful. That is definitely a mouthful, and I have to
Yeah,
agree. Yeah,
you
that
know.
that is a huge one, and I've said this on the podcast before, and it's just in the little. It can be in the little ways. I had this one interaction with a doctor many moons ago before I became a doula, who and I was addicted to sugar and had a
Mm,
lot of yeast infections from a really young age. Um, so I always knew when one was coming because I was like, oh, I binged a whole bunch of sugar and went to this doctor. And I walked into her office and told her I had a yeast infection. My first time
mm,
walking into her office, and she began to list off every sexually transmitted disease that there was. And I was just like, and every time she would say one, I would say, I have a yeast infection. I have a yeast infection. I have a yeast infection. She finally got so pissed that she was like, go get changed. And I was just like, all right, I got changed. She came in, she checked me, walked out, and was like, meet me in my office. And I sat down
mm.
because I knew. And she was like, I said, so, and she was like, you have a yeast infection. Why do we have to go through that? Like,
Right.
why do we have to go through that? You know,
Right.
and that was my first and last time in her office after that, because I was just like, I'm not dealing with someone like this. And this was a referral from a person of color who was like, she's great, she's amazing. And I was like, that wasn't my experience, and I'm not doing this, you
Right.
know. And years later, all I will say is this about her is, and you'll know, she is she was a very famous doctor, and probably one of the only ones in New York City that would deliver a baby breech.
Mm. Okay.
So, yeah. And
Okay.
everyone loved her, and I was just like, that's not my experience. That was
Right.
not mine. So
Yeah.
yeah, that is a good one to see.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think too, when we talk about referrals, people got to understand referrals are something that's tricky.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I think it's also based on like, when we talk about, oh, my experience was really great. Okay, what defines a great
Mm-hmm.
experience?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it the aesthetics of the place?
Yes.
Is it, because somebody said hi to
Yes.
you?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Same.
Is it because, they gave you some water to
Yes.
drink? Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Was it great in centering your bodily autonomy? Did it allow you the opportunity to express yourself and tell the person like, this is my health history and I know
Yeah.
what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is great,
Great. Exactly.
great care, and it's a
Exactly.
great referral as opposed to the other. So yeah, we need to reframe and
Yeah.
restructure those systems need to change.
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I would love to see those changes as well. Yeah. So my next segment is daily inspiration, and I want to know what brings you joy.
Ooh, what brings me joy? I have to pick one thing.
You list. You can list. Okay, list three.
What brings me joy? Okay, good food, good
Oh,
vegan food.
I've
Like
been
I
seeing
like.
your recipes, by the way. I am not convinced 100% that I will have some vegan food, but I will not completely commit to being veganism yet. I'm not there yet, but it has been, I've been like, what's the recipe? What's in that? It looks amazing. Okay.
Two things.
Yeah.
A little secret. I used to have a catering company back in the day.
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go.
So yeah, good plate of food. Laughter. I love to
Yes.
laugh. I think laughter is like the joy of of life.
Yeah.
I mean, people who really really know me know that I can be pretty goofy at times.
Yeah.
Um, and good music. I love like really really good
Yes.
vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's all about the vibes.
Yeah.
If people don't have the vibes, I'm like nah.
Nah,
It's
yeah.
yeah.
I have to say, this quarantine has been challenging, but I will tell you right now, the DJ sets on Instagram have been giving
Yes,
me all the life.
yes,
Like, I'm
all of
just
it, all
like,
of it.
all of it. I was like, this is helping me so much. So, yeah,
Yeah, I can dig that for real.
music is definitely my love language. I'm like, put on a song. I'm like,
Mhm.
I listen to music all day. I have music playing even in my bathroom because I was like,
Yes,
it should be everywhere.
I totally agree.
Yeah. What's your favorite scent?
Oh, my favorite scent would have to be Ethiopian frankincense and myrrh.
I've never smelled that one.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. That is my all-time favorite scent. I have not been able to find it anywhere here.
Mm-hmm.
My husband brought some back from Ethiopia, and hands down, that is my
Okay.
all-time favorite scent. Second scent would be Nag Champa.
Okay. What's a quote or a saying that inspires you?
Ooh, a quote or saying, "Do good and live."
Mm, that's a good one. Do good and
Yeah,
live. Yeah.
do good and live.
Yeah. Nothing's more simple than that. Yeah. Thanks for that. So now the next segment is where we get kind of tricky, right? Because
Okay.
it's going to be your birth stories.
All right,
And
let me
I
be
want to
short
give
version.
you want to give you room
Okay.
to, we got a little bit of your first. So
Mm.
your first was a home birth with
Yes.
midwives and a doula.
Yes.
And take the floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a hot August day and it was a hot August day in Bed-Stuy to be exact. Yeah, I mean I started out the day, woke up early, 6 a.m. I thought I was dreaming. That I was having contractions and I went back to bed or I lay back down. Then I was like, oh wait a minute, this is real. And then I called my midwife and I was like, just want to give you a heads up. She was like, all right, I'll see you later. Um, and we got up, my husband made a big meal. We walked through Saratoga Park.
Mm.
I took my shoes off. I hugged trees. I don't know what I was thinking about taking my shoes off in the grass but it's okay.
Yeah, but
Um, I came back. My neighbor who happened to be from the Caribbean. She was standing outside and she was like, oh my goodness, what's going on? So I was like, oh yeah, I'm in labor. I was like, so if you hear any noise,
yeah.
it's just us. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's okay. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, we're gonna have a baby in the house. She was like, really? And she goes into like this whole story and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I just remember like out of that first birth, postpartum, immediate postpartum, one, I didn't know how to hold a child, and I was like, this is crazy. Because they come out and you're
Yeah,
like,
they all
supposed to be like
wiggly.
so
Yeah,
like, oh my
exactly.
God. And I was like, oh my God, this is wonderful yet very wet.
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing everybody sweating in the room. And I was like, why are y'all sweating? And I'm the one that did the work. Um, but it was amazing. And for my first one, for my second one, once you had that first one, I think it becomes like, okay, I got this easy
Yeah.
breezy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find out I was pregnant with twins until I was 34 weeks. And
Wow.
so yeah, I started feeling like lightheaded or like, dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I think I had preeclampsia. And so I told my midwife and she was like, well, let's go check and see what's going on. And I remember having my 15-month-old in a stroller when I went. And, they're doing the sonogram and I'm like, I know I don't see two skulls. Like, there's no way I see two skulls. I'm like, they tripping. Like, I don't know. What is this? And the woman was like, I'm sorry, miss, we don't do high risk. And I was like, who's high risk? She was like, we don't do twins. I was like, who's having twins? I don't know what you're talking about. And so then she's like, I'm going to get my supervisor. And I was like, you do that. And so the woman comes back. And I knew, like, you know, I'm already a doula.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, it's like one of the denial phases.
Yes.
And so yeah, so she comes back and she's doing the whole shebit. And then yeah, she's like, yeah, you're having twins. And I was like, oh, okay. So I leave out and I call my husband on the phone. And he's a teacher, and he was teaching in the city. And he's like, I call him, he's like, what's up? And I'm like, I gotta tell you something. Now, anytime I start with I gotta tell you something, he already know it's about to be something. Usually when I say that, that means I'm pregnant.
Oh, okay.
So he was like, well, I know you're pregnant, so that's not it.
Yeah, exactly.
So then I was like, well, we're having twins. And he was like, you know what? I just gotta call you back. Like, I gotta call you back on that one. But yeah, my sister actually had kept saying it. She was like, you're having twins. And I was like, who the heck's having twins? Like, who has twins in their family?
Yeah.
And come to find out, my dad, which I didn't know, had an identical twin brother, who had died when he was a teenager. And so that was something I had no clue about.
Yeah.
So that was my second one. I ended up having having to go to the hospital for weekly NSTs. Blood pressure was really high one day. They were like, okay, we're going to admit you. So I was admitted from 35 weeks on at St. Vincent's Hospital, which is no longer exists.
There. It is a condominium. I pass by and I'm always like, oh my God.
Right. Yeah, no longer exists. And so like everybody knew me as a doula who was on the floor, who was advocating, who had like the doulas who would come and visit and bring me food because I wasn't eating that food.
No, that food's crappy.
Right. Yeah. And one day my blood pressure had spiked really, really high and I had to have an emergency C-section. And it was rough. It was, they had to do the spinal like a good 4 or 5 times. I was like, I had to be like, if you don't know what you're doing, I'm gonna need you to stop.
Yeah.
The recovery, was dread because I had to, once I went home, I still had to keep going back and forth because the babies were small. One was 4 pounds, 2 ounces. The other one was 3 pounds, 8 ounces. So, I have a toddler at home.
Yeah.
I have a cesarean. I'm pumping. I'm doing all of those things. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. And I don't say this lightly, but, postpartum, we don't talk about postpartum enough. But postpartum was one of the things where, I had the voice to be able to be like, something's not right, because I felt like they didn't like me. And what I, came to realize was like, chemically there was something going on where I felt like coming from a place where having a home birth at first and knowing what that experience is, and then going from a place of having, a cesarean, an unplanned one at that, even though I was able to advocate for myself and things of that nature. Oh, because that was the other thing. We had to like advocate for my incision, the type of incision that I wanted, all of that while I was laying on the table. I was like, no, no staples, no this. Like, I need you to do this, that, and the other. They were like, okay. Yeah, it was a lot of it was a lot. It was a lot on my body. It was a lot on my mental wellness. And I spoke up and I was like, something's not right. And so I was able to, get some help from other doulas, who were able to support me postpartum during that time. But a lot of people don't have the space to be able to do that. Or, and especially being a Black woman, like we're not given the grace to be able to say those things, if it wasn't for the fact that I had a trusted community where I could do that, if I would have went to a OB, I might have had my children taken away because they were like, oh, she doesn't have the mental capacity to be able to do this,
Exactly.
Regardless of the fact that there's a partner in the home or whatever. So that was my second experience. My third experience, I had a VBAC at home.
Okay.
And so I was like, well, I'm not going back to the hospital. Like, I wasn't concerned about a cesarean, like, having a previous one, because my first 4 are stair steps. They're 12, 11, and 10.
Okay.
So yeah, had a VBAC at home, or HBAC. It was amazing. I remember riding around, going grocery shopping, cooking dinner, putting the kids in bed, and then calling my midwives like, okay, Sam. And then I'm like coming and having a baby. And then my other two. One is 4 and one is 3. The 4-year-old, that was just quick. She was like lightning. Like she just shot out of my body. I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing. This is quick. This is a lot. Yeah. Like I was like, okay, all right. And then, but my last was my most difficult, which is surprising, right? Because most people are like, oh my God, it's so easy after a while. I'm like, no, each pregnancy is different. Yeah. But my last, same thing, home birth. I had me being foolish, eating chocolate, like 30 minutes before my midwife came to check me. And the fetal heart tones had raised. She was like, if I have to check, if I have to, forgetting I have a chocolate sensitivity.
Okay.
And if this keeps up, we might have to transfer. So then we end up going to the hospital. We rush to the hospital. I go to the hospital. I know everybody on the floor, which is weird. It's different when you don't know people when you go to a hospital. It's different when you know like the charge nurse and everybody that's there. And so, went on the floor, talked, they checked me out. They were like, okay, you're fine. Just sign an AMA, you could leave. And I was like, deuces. So I left. Exactly. Got in the car. We drove back to my house. I was in the living room, thought I would birth there. I tried the water birth thing. I was like, that's trash. I appreciate everybody who does it, but for me, I was like, I need to stand up. Or maybe that's the cancer in me that's just like, I'm already a water sign. I don't need more water. I need to be on solid ground. And so, water birth didn't work for me. But yeah, so like my vaginal muscles were really tight, the walls. So like I kept feeling, at first I was pushing and kept feeling like I was hitting something, and I had to say to my midwife, and I was like, do I have a cervical lip? I was like, because something's going on. Yeah. And sure enough, she checked and I had one. And it was one of those things where I was like, can you move it? And she was like, you ready? I was like, no.
That is an adventure right there. Oh.
And yeah, she did. And then all of a sudden it was like full force, like, but then my vaginal walls, they were so tight. This is why you should not overdo Kegels. So she had to like really massage them to get his head to come out. And which that was a lot of work. Like I had never pushed so hard before ever. Wow. To birth any of my children. So yeah, I was like, okay, but right after it was fine, and he's running around here doing the most now.
I hear him. Yeah. So what would you say that birth, and this is another one that's not on the list, but it just came to me. What did birth teach you about yourself?
Ooh. Birth taught me that how to trust my instincts, how to trust my intuition. And to know that I'm not alone. Yeah. If that makes any sense. I think a lot of us, when I was in my early 20s, I'll be 42 this year.
You a baby.
When I was in my early 20s, I think we go through this thing of like, you feel this like level of emptiness, this void, this space where you're like trying to fill it with things. Yes. We're always looking for the things. And what birth really taught me was that you don't need to fill yourself up with anything but the love of yourself and trusting in who you are and what you know. Yeah. And because I had done like different spiritual classes, and because you're looking, you're searching, exactly. You're yearning, you want. And they were pivotal in me being where I am today. Like I took Queen Afua's Sacred Woman back in 2004. Wow. Jesus. Yeah, it was a while ago. And all of those things are great catalysts for you having a better understanding of self. But I think true understanding of self is being able to like look within and be good, and be able to sit with whatever you see, and understand life and be accepting of what it is. And I think birth allows you the vision to be able to sit and to see what it is, because it is what it is. Like you can't make it out to be something else. Nope. Like you have to. You feel everything, you're in it, you know what I mean? Like all the emotions, all the feelings, physically, spiritually. You could try to run away from yourself, which a lot of us try to do while we're in that process.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we have those 4 or 5 day labors, right?
Yes.
But really, it's about you having the opportunity to tap into self. And that's what it taught me. It taught me to not be afraid to be in that space. Because there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, you're right. But especially you do feel everything. And I know that at one point in my labor, I was visited by my great grandmother and my grandmother and all my aunts, because I was like, you felt that fear, and I was like, I don't have anything to be afraid of. They all did this. They all did this. That's why I'm here. So that is true. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Me personally, you can find me on IG at Chanel_Porchia. If you're looking for Ancient Song, you can find us at Ancient Song on IG, or on Facebook. And I don't mess with Facebook personally.
I mean, I've been off of Facebook for a bit too. I'm like, I'll post on Instagram and Facebook, then I'm like on Instagram.
It could go over
I'm
but
I'm gonna stay IG, because I was like, y'all over here, that's a whole different. I just can't. I cannot.
Yeah, you can definitely find me on IG.
Yeah.
Chilling. And I mean, that's my personal page, so people get an opportunity to see a little bit of my personal life.
Yeah, wonderful.
And the things I do with my children's, because my children's is always there.
Your babies are beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna tell them you said that.
Yeah, tell them. I every time I see them, I'm like, God bless, because they are just bright and light, and like you can just see, the love and that just emanates, right? They're just like so pure. Every time you take a picture of them, they're like, hey, we here. How we do? Like, I was like, look at them. That's right. Living out loud as we should.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much for being on my podcast.